The Chief Information Officer of the United States, Claire Martorana, says the huge cash increase in the Technology Modernization Fund means agencies can propose bigger projects. Federal News Network reports Martorana says the TMF board's ready to handle a big influx of applications. Mark Forman is former E-Gov Administrator at the Office of Management and Budget. I call you the former federal CIO, Mark. I hope you'll forgive me for the protocol breach. You wrote recently the most important element of any modernization case, TMF board or not, is the business case. Where do agencies go wrong on their business cases, Mark?
I think the capabilities to do business cases have deteriorated over time as agencies have viewed this as kind of a paperwork exercise. And that goes all the way up to their investment review boards, their executive team that was supposed to review the business case. That's become kind of a check the box. I really like the way Daniel Kahneman in his book, Thinking Fast and Slow, called it delusional optimism. Everybody thinks that together they can do a better job than before, but the Standish Group keeps saying we're at 13% success rates for government IT projects.
What makes people think that? What's in people's heads that makes them think this time will be different?
Well, look, I think it's that they are confident in themselves. They've developed that to be at a senior level in their career, but they're not willing to do the work that needs to be done. And we continue in government to have this issue of poor requirements definition. So I think this has to start with an understanding of how do you fundamentally simplify the business processes? How do you improve your responsiveness and response time in helping the citizens? And that means taking advantage of new practices like user-centered design and human-centered design, but working that into the requirements process. Of course, the other part of this is people underestimate the magnitude of risk that they have to manage. And so in the business case, they really ought to be able to estimate what's the probability we'll achieve these benefits and do a valid assessment of risk. The Project Management Institute for years has said there's 6 categories of risk you gotta look at. And OMB and the Klinger-Cohn Act, the E-Gov Act, a number of these laws said you need to include not your best guess at cost, but your risk-weighted cost estimate, your risk-weighted schedule. And I think when agencies do a good job of understanding their requirements, evaluating their alternatives, and then doing a risk management plan, they have success. And if not, they fall in that 87% bucket of failures or not achieving their outcome desires.
Your friend and mine, Casey Coleman, was on the program recently talking about the need to update some of those pieces of legislation you just referenced. Several of those you were intimately involved with. What should those updates look like, or are they even necessary in your view, Mark?
I think it's premature to update the legislation. Legislation doesn't say use waterfall or don't use waterfall. It doesn't say use Agile or DevOps or use a contractor or don't use a contractor. What legislation basically says is Congress needs accountability on the money. You know, I hear the term $100 billion and $90 billion being spent on IT. The government basically more than doubled in size over the last year. And intuitively, we know there has to be somewhere around a very substantial increase, whether it's $10 billion or $100 billion. We don't quite know. Those numbers are being hidden on what's actually being spent on government IT, especially this year. So the laws require accountability, and they set up a structure for that. What I think needs to be done before we change the laws or modify the laws is a good set of hearings to get at the chronic issue that programs own the funding, they buy their own IT, they don't trust or they don't use the expertise of their CIO organization. And generally, that has to get addressed on the leadership side of agencies. You know, we've had a lot of hearings with CIOs. We rarely hear the agency heads where agencies have program problems. Maybe you see it in authorizing committees, but we don't see it in the government affairs type committees. And I think that's where any changes in the legislation have to occur. How do we get the accountability for the money being spent better?
We just have a little bit of time left. I'd be remiss in having a former federal CIO on the day after the cyber executive order and not ask you about it. What was your takeaway from it, Mark? You warned me in 2006 about the dangers of bolting on cybersecurity to government systems and programs.
Well, I think it's great to have these follow-up actions like these boards that are in there. I do think we need more modern elements, but encryption's always been required. That's kind of the touchstone for government getting to some cybersecurity. The real value, I think, is now the shift to zero trust approaches. Role-based security's kind of lived its course. We've known this in audits for the last several years, that a lot of the problems occur because of the limitation on role-based security. So now, though, we get back to this issue of agency heads. I don't think there's a CIO that says that we shouldn't do cybersecurity, but I don't think that the agency heads have really embraced the commitment by the program offices that, again, own most of the money, they own the applications, to really ensuring the security of those applications. And a zero trust approach is going to force that debate to the forefront. So I think that's really good.
Mark Forman, thanks very much as always.
Thank you.